Story number 1, Summer Intern. I arrived at Summit Station 12 on July 8th in the afternoon. The previous technician, a man named Garrett, had been there for 6 weeks and seemed ready to leave. We spent 11 minutes on the handoff briefing, which covered the calibration schedule for the anemometers, the barometric sensor maintenance log, and the current supply inventory. Everything was standard. Near the end, Garrett mentioned that he had stopped using the secondary anemometer on the North Tower after the 3rd week because the readings seemed erratic. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. The station operated with redundant systems for a reason. I settled into the small cabin and spent my first 3 days running the standard verification checks. All instruments were responding correctly. The primary barometer, the backup unit in the secondary enclosure, and the automated logging system were all synchronized and within acceptable variance. The anemometers on both towers were functioning. The hygrometer was stable. Nothing required immediate attention. On my 4th night, I was reviewing the previous day's data logs when I noticed something. Between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., the barometric pressure readings were identical. Not similar, identical. The same value repeated at precisely 3-minute intervals, which should not occur in nature. Wind conditions that evening had been variable, shifting from northwest to northeast, yet the pressure log showed no fluctuation whatsoever during those hours. I flagged the entry and continued monitoring. The next night, the same pattern appeared, and the night after that. On July 13th, I performed a full physical inspection of all sensors. I climbed both towers, checked the barometer housings for water intrusion, examined the sensor connections, and verified the calibration against the manual mercury reference we kept in the station. Everything was functioning correctly. There were no mechanical faults. The readings made no sense, but the equipment itself was sound. I documented my findings and continued logging. The pattern persisted for 6 consecutive nights, consistent and undisturbed. Then, on July 20th, something different appeared in the logs. At 2:47 in the morning, the barometric pressure reading spiked to 0 millibars. A complete vacuum. The value held for exactly 1 minute and 43 seconds. Then the readings resumed normal variation, as if nothing had happened. I reviewed the logs 3 times. The timestamp was clear, the value was unmistakable. 0 millibars is not a malfunction signature I had ever encountered. It is not a calibration drift. It is not noise in the system. It is an impossible reading. I contacted regional dispatch on the satellite phone that morning. I reported the anomalous data and requested guidance on whether the station should be taken offline for maintenance. While I was speaking to the dispatcher, I was watching the analog barometer on the wall. The needle, which had been steady at approximately 30.1 inches, dropped smoothly to 0. The dispatcher was asking me to repeat the pressure value. When I watched it happen, the needle sat at 0 for the duration of our conversation, which lasted 4 minutes, then rose back to normal reading. I told the dispatcher what I had just observed. There was a pause. The dispatcher said that the readings I had logged were unusual, and that I should follow standard protocol for instrument malfunction. I was to flag all barometric data as corrupted, continue logging using the redundant systems, and file a maintenance request for the autumn shutdown. That night, the 0 pressure event occurred again at 2:47 a.m., and the night after that, all 3 barometers, including the manual reference unit, showed 0 simultaneously. I watched the analog needle drop and rise. I watched the digital displays cycle through the same impossible value. The redundant system, which operated on a separate power supply and separate sensor, showed the same reading. On July 24th, I made a connection I should have made earlier. The zero pressure events, which now occurred with absolute regularity at 2:47 a.m., corresponded with complete silence outside. Not quiet, complete silence. The wind, which had been present every night of my rotation, stopped entirely. No sound at all. No rustling of trees. No distant animal calls. No ambient noise. The silence lasted between 40 and 90 seconds, and when it ended, the pressure readings normalized, and the normal sounds of the mountain returned. I did not contact dispatch again. I continued my rotation. I completed the remaining 2 weeks of my assignment using manual observations only, recording wind speed and direction by hand, estimating cloud cover, noting temperature and humidity. I did not attempt to troubleshoot the barometers further. I did not climb the towers again. I filed my final data logs as corrupted due to equipment failure, as instructed. On August 19th, I was relieved by the next technician. I did not mention the zero pressure events or the silence. I completed the handoff briefing in 12 minutes, covering only the routine maintenance schedule and the supply inventory. I noted that the barometric sensors required recalibration during the autumn shutdown. My supervisor called me into the Portland office on August 26th and reassigned me to administrative duties in the Climate Data Processing Division. No explanation was provided. I accepted the reassignment. Summit Station 12 was listed as temporarily offline for the following season due to equipment failure. The barometric data from July 2019 was archived in the restricted section and marked for no further analysis. The file was closed. Story number 2, Seasonal Patrol. I arrived at Shishi Beach Patrol Cabin on November 3rd for a standard 10-day rotation. The weather briefing indicated a low pressure system moving in from the Pacific, but nothing unusual for the season. Winter monitoring in the backcountry is routine work. Check the cabin systems, maintain the perimeter, log visitor activity, monitor water quality in the inlet. I had done this rotation 4 times before. The cabin sits isolated on a rocky outcrop above the tide line, accessible only by a 6-mile hike from the nearest trailhead. I was expecting minimal contact and routine weather documentation. On day 2, I found boot prints on the beach approaching the cabin. The prints came from the direction of the tide line, where the sand was still damp from the previous night's tide. They were fresh. Standard issue Park Service boots, size 10, the same size I wear. The tread pattern was distinctive, a Vibram sole with the characteristic wear marks of regular field use. I followed them from approximately 30 meters out, where they emerged from the waterline, all the way to the cabin door. The prints were clear and deep, indicating deliberate pace. At the threshold they stopped, not turned, not wandered. Stopped at the exact point where the wooden step began. I documented the prints with photographs and measurements per protocol. In my daily log, I noted the discovery and the tread match. I also noted that I had not left the cabin during the night, and no other personnel were scheduled for this rotation. I filed a standard incident report to dispatch noting the prints, but indicating no apparent security breach or safety concern. The response from the ranger station was routine. Photograph the area, maintain normal protocols, report any further contact. That night I woke at approximately 2:45 in the morning to the sound of the radio handset being used. The cabin was dark. I remained still and listened. My voice, was completing a radio check-in with dispatch. The call sign was correct. The timestamp was correct. The voice was steady and professional, reporting normal conditions, no visitor contact, no maintenance issues. The dispatcher acknowledged and signed off. I did not move. When the transmission ended, I heard the handset being replaced on its cradle. I waited until dawn before turning on the cabin lights. The radio log showed the check and recorded at 2:45. My signature was in the transmission log. I had not made that transmission. I was in my bunk when it occurred. I verified the time 3 times. I did not file a report for this event. On day 4, I reviewed my daily log entries from the previous days. The entries on day 2 and day 3 had been rewritten. The handwriting was mine. I recognized the slant and the pressure of the pen. The entries documented visitor contacts that had not occurred, specific observations about a group of 4 hikers on day 2, including descriptions of their equipment and stated destinations. A solo hiker on day 3, noted as moving north along the beach. Detailed observations about weather conditions and beach conditions that I had not recorded. All written in my hand, all dated and timed in the correct format. All entries I had not made, I removed those pages from the log. I placed them in an envelope and sealed it. I began a new log entry documenting the discrepancy in my action. I did not file a report. On day 5, I attempted to leave the rotation early. I prepared my pack and began hiking the inland trail toward the main trailhead at approximately 9 in the morning. The weather was clear. I maintained a steady pace and checked my watch at regular intervals. After 47 minutes of hiking, I recognized the rocky outcrop above the cabin through the trees. I had returned to the starting point. I checked my compass. The bearing was correct. I had not deviated. I hiked again, this time taking a different trail to the north. After 47 minutes, I was again at the cabin. I attempted a third route to the east. 47 minutes, the cabin. I did not attempt to leave again. On day 6, I maintained normal protocols. I completed the required maintenance checks. I logged weather observations. I did not file any reports. I did not attempt radio contact beyond the required check-in, which I performed myself at the designated time. On day 7, I stopped filing official reports. I began maintaining 2 separate logs. The first was the standard daily log that would be submitted with my rotation report. I filled it with observations I had not made and visitor contacts that had not occurred. The second log I kept in my pack, hidden in a sealed compartment. In this log, I recorded only what I directly observed: the boot prints, the radio transmission, the rewritten entries, the hiking attempts, the time intervals. I wrote factually and without interpretation. I maintained this dual record for the remaining 3 days of the rotation. The rotation ended on schedule. On day 10, I packed my equipment and hiked out on the main trail. The hike took the normal time. I reached the trailhead without incident. I submitted my official rotation report, which documented 11 visitor contacts across the 10-day period, detailed observations about seasonal patterns, and routine maintenance completion. The report was accepted without question. I was reassigned to desk duties in Port Angeles 2 weeks later. My supervisor indicated that the reassignment was routine and related to staffing needs. I was instructed to submit to weekly medical evaluations as part of standard post-rotation protocol for extended backcountry assignments. I attended these evaluations without discussing the cabin or the events of the rotation. The evaluations found no physical or cognitive abnormalities. The evaluations continued for 8 weeks and then ceased. The Shishi Beach Patrol cabin remains in active rotation. Other rangers have completed rotations there without reported incident. I have not been assigned to that location again. I have been advised that my experience falls under operational stress protocols and is not subject to further review or discussion. My sealed log remains in my personal possession. The pages I removed from the official log are also in my possession. I have not attempted to explain what occurred during those 10 days, as the explanation remains unavailable to me. This account is being filed as requested and will be archived accordingly. Story number 3, Harvest Monitor. I arrived at the facility at 11:30 on a Thursday night in late October to conduct a routine overnight sanitation audit. 3 failed microbial swab tests from the boning room had triggered the inspection protocol, and I had been assigned to verify that corrective measures had been implemented and that the facility was operating within acceptable parameters. The night shift supervisor, a man named Kendrick, met me at the loading dock. He was cooperative and professional. He walked me through the kill floor first, which was shut down and clean, the stainless steel surfaces still damp from the evening wash cycle. The fabrication lines were similarly idle and sanitized. Everything appeared to be in order. Kendrick provided me with the cleaning logs, temperature records, and chemical inventory sheets. I made notes and took photographs according to standard procedure. At approximately 1:15 in the morning, I moved to the cold storage section to verify temperature maintenance and inspect the stored product. I was checking cold storage unit 4 when I noticed the digital readout on the exterior panel showed 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That was too warm. I pulled out my infrared thermometer and pointed it at the interior wall, visible through the small observation window. The reading came back at 61 degrees. I informed Kendrick that there appeared to be a malfunction with the unit's cooling system. He seemed surprised. He said the unit had been serviced 2 weeks prior and had been holding steady. I told him I would need to open it and inspect the contents to determine if any product had been compromised. When I opened the door, the interior was cold. I could feel the temperature drop immediately, but the space was nearly empty. There was a single beef carcass hanging from the center rail. It was a full side, still intact, suspended by a hook through the shoulder joint. What struck me was that it was visibly trembling. The muscle tissue was contracting in small, rhythmic movements. I checked the facility log that Kendrick had provided. That carcass had been logged as processed and moved to fabrication 14 hours prior. It should not have been in cold storage unit 4. I asked Kendrick to come back with me to verify the log entry. When we both entered the unit, the carcass was motionless. The digital readout on the interior panel now matched the exterior display 34 degrees. I took the temperature again with my infrared thermometer. 34 degrees. I made a note of the discrepancy and flagged the unit for further investigation. Over the next 2 hours, I conducted a systematic inspection of the remaining cold storage units. In Unit 2, I found the same carcass. It was partially fabricated this time. The ribs had been removed, the brisket separated. The log showed no record of it being moved or processed. In Unit 6, I found it again, this time reduced to smaller cuts arranged on a stainless steel table. Though the unit's interior was otherwise empty, and the table had not been logged as present in that space. Each time, the carcass was in a different state of processing. Each time, the logs showed no movement or handling after the initial storage entry. Each time, when I called Kendrick to verify, the carcass would be motionless by the time he arrived, and the temperature readings would align with the digital displays. At 3:45 in the morning, I went to the boning room to reference the fabrication records with the facility's master log. Kendrick was standing alone in the center of the room with his back to me. He was making cutting motions with his hands, the precise movements of someone using a boning knife and steel, but his hands were empty. There was no table in front of him, no product, no tools. The fluorescent lights overhead were cycling between full brightness and complete darkness at regular intervals, approximately 7 seconds on, 7 seconds off. In the darkness, I could hear the sound of a blade moving through meat and bone. I did not approach him. I left the boning room and went directly to my vehicle. I locked my field notes and photographs in the equipment case in the back seat. I called my regional director at his home number. It was 4 in the morning. I told him I was terminating the audit and leaving the premises. I told him I could not complete the inspection. He asked me why. I told him the facility was not safe for continued inspection. He said he understood. He told me to surrender all physical records when I returned to the field office, and that he would handle the report filing. The facility was issued a passing audit report 2 days later. The signature on the report was not mine. I did not recognize the inspector's name listed on the document. My own field notes were never entered into the federal database. There is no record of my visit to the facility. I was reassigned to grain elevator inspections the following month. The reassignment was presented as a routine rotation. I have not been scheduled for overnight meat processing audits since. I have not returned to that facility. I have not been asked to explain the missing report. The incident has been archived under a classification level I am not permitted to reference in writing.